The speech that shook Africa. It's the day the earth stood still. There are moments in history when time seems to pause, when the heartbeat of a people echoes louder than speeches, louder than applause. June 1st was one of those days. The sun had barely risen above Addis Ababa, yet its light seemed to fall differently, gentler, more sacred, as if even nature knew something monumental was about to unfold. The African Union headquarters stood tall, draped in silk and stone, flags of every nation fluttering as usual. But the people inside knew this would not be a usual gathering. For the first time in history, the chamber would be addressed by a man not molded by politics, not crafted by foreign donors, but forged in fire. A soldier, a revolutionary, a son of the soil, a young captain who had defied every odd, survived every ambush and risen, not to power, but to purpose. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, no older than many of the continent's exploited youth, walked into the chamber with no entourage. Just a simple military uniform, boots stained with the dust of his homeland, and eyes that carried the sorrow of a broken continent. And as he approached the podium, an eerie silence descended. Not out of protocol, but out of reverence. This was not a speech. This was Africa's reckoning. Ibrahim Traoré speaks. He looked out across the hall. Presidents, prime ministers, kings, diplomats, all seated in silence, blinking at the young man who stood before them like a ghost from the past, like a flame long extinguished but suddenly reignited. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice low but steady. "I did not come here today to speak as a head of state. I came to speak as an orphan of Africa, a child abandoned by a system designed to betray him before he could crawl." The silence grew heavier. One could hear the breath of the room catch. "I come from a land where our gold enriches others while our children dig barefoot in pits, dying before they reach adolescence. I come from villages where mothers die giving birth because there are no clinics, yet just miles away, foreign companies build air-conditioned offices to manage the plunder of our soil." He paused, looked to the ceiling, and I ask, how long? How long must we lie to ourselves? His voice grew stronger. "We speak of African unity, yet we still sign defense pacts with our colonizers. We wear suits stitched in Europe while our textile workers starve. We celebrate independence, but our currencies bear the names and faces of our oppressors." Some presidents shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their eyes. But Traoré did not stop. "I do not fear death. I fear betrayal. Betrayal of those who died dreaming of a free Africa. Of Sankara, Lumumba, Cabral, Nair. I carry their dreams on my shoulders. And their ghosts walk with me today." A hush fell. A tear rolled down the cheek of a delegate from Congo. A young diplomat from Malawi began to sob. "I am the son of a farmer. I have watched my people choose between eating and sending their children to school. I have seen villages burn not from war, but from hunger, from desperation, from neglect." He looked each leader in the eye. "We sit in this chamber with titles, Your Excellency, Commander-in-Chief, Head of State, but what does that mean if our people are dying with dignity stripped from their bones? What does it mean if we kneel before the IMF, before the World Bank, before NATO, while our ancestors scream beneath the soil for justice?" And then came the moment that broke the room. "Last year," he said, his voice cracking, "I visited a school in a small village in Burkina Faso. The children had no desks, no books. One of them, her name was Mariam, walked 3 hours every morning just to learn. When I asked her what she wanted to be, she looked up at me and said, 'I want to be free. Not rich, not powerful, just free.'" He paused, and the silence was unbearable. How can I, as a leader, sleep at night knowing Mariam walks barefoot through snakes and thorns for a chance at life? How can I wear tailored suits and attend gala dinners while her future is bartered away in foreign boardrooms? The hall was no longer quiet. It was weeping. The silence that followed. He ended not with applause in mind, but with a challenge. If you fear the West more than your own people, then you are not a leader, you are a gatekeeper of the colonizer's dream. But if you still carry one drop of Africa in your soul, then rise with me. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. He stepped down. No music played. No clapping followed. The chamber sat in stunned, humbled silence. Some bowed their heads in shame. Others stared into the distance, haunted by what they had just witnessed. But outside, the world was not quiet. The streets speak back. In the streets of Ouagadougou, children crowded around dusty radios. In Lagos, youth gathered in cafes and listened to each word like scripture. In Cape Town, students in worn-out uniforms held up signs reading, "We are Mariam." In Nairobi, elderly women wept. In Mogadishu, war-hardened men trembled. In Bamako, women lit candles in honor of every fallen African child forgotten by the state. A movement was reborn, not led by a party or funded by NGOs, but born in the hearts of the voiceless. Across the continent, Ibrahim Traoré's words spread like wildfire. And in quiet corners of power, in Paris, Washington, Brussels, panic began to set in. Plots and prayers. The days that followed were a storm. Some leaders praised him openly. Others called emergency meetings behind closed doors. There were whispers of assassination, of sanctions, of smear campaigns. But the people had already heard. The spell was broken. The veil had lifted. And Traoré, aware of the risks, stood firm. Let them come. I did not come into this world to live in fear. I came to finish the dream they tried to kill. Letters to a new generation. He received hundreds of thousands of letters. From schoolchildren in Somalia. From farmers in Togo. From prisoners in South Africa. From widows in Libya. From exiled scholars in Haiti. Each one began the same. Thank you for speaking what we have screamed into the wind for decades. Final words, a torch rekindled. This was not just a speech. It was a resurrection. Ibrahim Traoré did not seek praise. He did not ask for allegiance. He demanded truth. And in doing so, he reminded Africa of its scars, but also its strength. His voice became a mirror, forcing every leader to face their reflection. His courage became a torch, passed from heart to heart, street to street, border to border. And even if they silence him one day, the seed has already taken root. The people have heard. The ancestors have stirred. And history has taken note. Because for the first time in decades, tears flowed in the African Union, not from grief, but from the unbearable beauty of truth. And truth, once spoken with fire, cannot be unspoken. Long live the dreamers. Long live the truth. Long live Africa. The night after the speech. A man alone with his thoughts. It was midnight in Addis Ababa. The city had quieted, but Ibrahim Traoré had not slept. He sat alone in his small hotel room, no grand suite, no armored guards, just a notebook, a flickering lamp, and the weight of a continent on his shoulders. He had spoken the truth. Unfiltered, untamed, unafraid. But now came the silence that follows thunder. And in that silence, he listened, not to advisors or generals, but to the whispers of the ancestors and the cries of Africa's forgotten children. He remembered Mariam, the barefoot girl who wanted to be free. He thought of his mother, who had died too young, clutching a broken rosary, whispering, "God, protect my children from hunger and from those who profit from it." He thought of his father, beaten by colonial soldiers for refusing to give up his land. And now he wondered if he too would be swallowed by the same machine that devoured so many before him. The world responds, the earth trembles. In Paris, a meeting was called. Unmarked doors. Cold rooms. Faces without names. "He's becoming a symbol," one man said. "Then we must make him a cautionary tale," another replied. They didn't fear his army. They feared his words. They feared that a barefoot soldier had reminded a continent that its chains were illusions. They feared that truth had become contagious. Sanctions were drafted. Intelligence was gathered. Plans whispered. But the fire was already burning beyond control. In London, they called him a radical. In Brussels, a threat to stability. In Washington, a militant demagogue. But in the dusty corners of Senegal, Kenya, Ghana, and Sudan, he had a new name. Our brother. The one who spoke. The flame. A storm of rebirth, from ashes to awakening. In Malawi, Students renamed their school Thomas Sankara Academy for Truth and Justice. In Liberia, children marched through the streets holding signs that read, "We are not your puppets." In a remote village in Niger, an elder performed a long-forgotten ancestral rite, pouring libation into the earth, whispering to the spirits, "You asked for one who would not bow. He has come. Now strengthen him." And across the Sahel, where dust clouds often mask the cries of the hungry, murals of Ibrahim Traoré began to appear. Not drawn in luxury, but etched into walls by coal, charcoal, blood, and hope. Traoré's inner battle, the loneliness of truth. But behind the strength, Traoré was a man. And the price of truth was solitude. He began receiving death threats, some from foreign powers, others from within Africa itself. Former allies turned cold. Trusted voices grew silent. One night he wrote in his notebook, "To walk with lions is to accept you may die with jackals at your feet. But I will not bow. I'd rather be killed for the truth than praised for betrayal." His ministers urged him to tone it down. International donors pulled out of projects. Aid was cut. Rumors swirled of military coups, drone strikes, poison deals. And yet, he rose each morning, not to defend himself, but to teach, to speak, to build. He visited the graves of fallen revolutionaries. He knelt by Sankara's memorial and said, "Forgive us. We were silent for too long. But the silence is broken now." A mother's letter, Africa's spiritual wound exposed. One day, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From a 72-year-old woman in Angola. She wrote, "My son, I lost 3 children to war, 2 to hunger. My husband died waiting for justice. But when I heard your speech, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time, I felt Africa had remembered itself. I don't know if they will let you live. But know this, every tear you've shed waters a seed. And one day, the tree will grow. Even if we do not live to see its fruit, we will die knowing we planted it." He read that letter over and over. And that night, he stood on the rooftop alone, looking at the stars and whispered, "If I fall, let 10,000 rise in my place." In foreign embassies, agents whispered into phones, "He is becoming untouchable among the people." Then turn the people against him. How? Starve them. Blame him. The plot was not to shoot him, but to suffocate him with isolation. To turn African leaders against him. To paint him as reckless, as unstable. To spark unrest so that his own people would doubt him. But the old methods no longer worked. Because something had shifted, not just politically, but spiritually. A continent in spiritual uprising. Churches prayed for him by name. Mosques mentioned him in their sermons. Shrines lit candles with his photo on the altar. Drums in the Congo forests beat rhythms of war and awakening. Griots in Mali sang of a young lion who challenged the kings of gold. Children in refugee camps drew him beside doves, fists, flames, and freedom. A torch that will never die. Traoré stood once more before his people. Not to declare war, but to declare hope. They will try to silence me. They may even succeed. But know this, Africa is no longer asleep. We are not begging. We are remembering. We are not poor. We are plundered. We are not weak. We are wounded. And now, we are healing. And then he said, "If I fall, do not mourn me for long. Organize. Rise. Reclaim. For I am only one man. But you are millions." The crowd erupted in chants. Africa will rise. We are the storm. We are the children of truth. And as the sun set behind him, casting a golden flame across the horizon, it was clear. Even if they silence his voice, they can never silence his message.